Earlier this year, a new Pokemon game was announced, and that game is Pokemon Champions. Pokemon Champions is going to be a multiplayer focused battle simulator, which could be gearing up to be the future of competitive Pokemon. While the trailer didn't reveal too much, there was a few big things showcased. The biggest reveal, in my opinion, is that Pokemon Champions will not only be available on the Switch family of systems, but it will also be available on iOS and Android. I can't stress enough how big this is, as bringing competitive Pokemon to the mobile devices is huge for accessibility. And this is huge for a few reasons. The first is that Mega Pokemon are returning to the game. The second is that we see a Mega Evolved Pokemon battling a Terrestrialized Pokemon, meaning this could be the first time since Generation 7 where we can use more than one gimmick at a time. It also opens the door for Z-Moves and Dynamax to make a return, which could lead to some potentially crazy formats in the future. Outside of the fact that it was a double battle that was showcased in the trailer, we did get a little information regarding Pokemon's home compatibility, and it did say that Pokemon Home can be used to transfer Pokemon in, but Pokemon obtained in Pokemon Champions can't be moved out of home. They also mentioned that the whole roster won't be available at launch. To what extent, we don't know yet. I think Pokemon Champions is going to completely change the way we play competitive Pokemon. So today, I want to discuss all of the things that I want to know leading up to the release of Pokemon Champions. So the first big question for me here is monetization. Will this game be free or will it be a paid-for game? Personally, I want this game to be free because at the end of the day, I think having this on mobile devices is incredibly important. And because of that, I really want this game to be accessible to the broad public, right? I want everyone to be able to pick up this game and play the game 100% free to play if they choose to. Now, I understand Game Freak's a company, they need to make some money, right? And because of that, I do definitely think there will be ways that they'll monetize this game. I pray that it is a free-to-play game and they add something like a battle pass into the game. Personally, I'm a huge fan of battle passes. I will throw a lot of money at them if I get to buy, some cool things for my characters. They could throw in things like, potential throwing styles. I'm sure there's going to be some costumes, maybe some Pokemon Champion exclusive Pokeballs. Of course, there was I was going to say ribbons, but you probably wouldn't purchase ribbons. There was like the seals from Generation 4 that they could add to it. Like, there's a lot of little things they could do. A major thing, of course, I think character customization, not only for your trainer, but Pokemon as well, would be really, really cool to see. But yeah, I really pray that this game is free. But of course, I understand they're a company, they need to make money. So yeah, give me a battle pass, man. The next thing I want to talk about here is the release date. Now, this is something I have seen the community be very, very, I guess, separated on. I've seen some people saying they think this is going to be an end of 2026 launch. I'm seeing some people agree with me saying, hey, it's going to be out very, very soon. And yeah, everyone's kind of all over the shop with this. Now, basically, I am personally leaning on this game will launch around the time of the World Championships this year. If I had to guess, August 22nd is the date I have in mind. The reason for that is the week after Worlds. And I think there would be no better time to showcase this game than at the World's Finals. To me, it makes way too much sense. You play the entirety of the tournament essentially on Scarlet and Violet, and then for the World Championships, the finals in particular, you can do juniors, masters, and seniors if you choose. Put that on Pokemon Champions as a showcase, right? I understand why they might not want to do that, of course. Some people might want a proper send-off to Scarlet and Violet, but I do think that would be one of the best things they could do just to showcase this game off. I think it also makes a lot of sense as well, as the new format should hopefully start on September 1st, based off everything we currently know. And because of that, having Worlds be, I think it's like 17th of August or something like that, around that mid to the later part of August. It just makes, again, a lot of sense to have us, roll into this new game basically for September 1st. That's kind of what I'm thinking. If that does not happen, I think the only other possible thing here is a November/December launch. And the big reason for that is one, Nintendo currently don't have a November launch game, a November title coming out right now, which I definitely think they'll kind of want to push that, similar to what they did with TCG Pocket last year. But also too, if we don't get a September 1st format on Pokemon Champions, it also, kind of leads to, 4 months after that is January 1st. So I think, potentially launching Champions around November to December makes a lot of sense, because it gives players, enough time to get the game. If you have to play through a potential story, you can do that. You can basically just, you get to play the game for a month, and then you jump in January 1st for official competitive tournaments. I do believe there's I saw someone mention this the other day, but there's no tournaments between December 20th and then sometime early January. There's a 2-week period there. So again, it would make a lot of sense in my mind that, potentially that's when we jump into the new game. But I truly think that this game will launch this year. I was looking into this not too long ago. Apparently, since Diamond and Pearl, only one game has ever been announced. Main series game, I should say, has been announced. They're not released in the same year, and that was Legends ZA, which of course coming out this year, so it doesn't really help my argument. But yeah, I truly think this game's coming out this year. It doesn't make any sense to me to be playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet past worlds this year. Now, with that out of the way, I want to talk about what I think is probably the most important thing I want to see with Pokemon Champions. And that is balance. Balance patches, balance changes, whatever you want to call it. I think this game needs to bring balance to VGC. I truly think with this Pokemon Champions game, Nintendo, Game Freak, whoever, they could be looking at trying to make Pokemon into an esport. And while this game is fantastic to play, I love playing it competitively. When you compare it to some of the other big esports out there, things like, Counter-Strike, Dota 2, League of Legends, it really just isn't on the same level. This game has way too much inconsistency. There's clearly a massive imbalance when you look at the roster of Pokemon. Of course, you have things that are incredibly broken. There's a lot of really bad RNG in this game. And because of that, I think there is just a lot of things they need to change. So, as I was saying, first things first, stats, need to be buffed, right? Stats and moves, essentially, really need buffs. And what do I mean by this? One, I think, sorry, I said stats and moves. I mean, stats and moves and Pokemon. God, English is hard. I think a Pokemon like Butterfree and Beedrill just need more stats, right? You look at them, yes, of course, they're these Route 1 Pokemon that you don't use too much. I think they need big stat buffs. Even my goat Swellow, absolutely love that mon to bits. Its stats are very, very subpar, right? Especially when you compare it to some of the beasts of the game, like Urshifu, right? Even you look at some of the non-legendaries, you got a guy like Staraptor whose stats and everything are just a lot better than someone like Swellows. So because of that, I would like to see a big stat buff, especially for Pokemon like base 450 and under. The Pokemon in that 450 to 500 range stats, like, yes, they could definitely use a little buff, but they're the kind of Pokemon as well you can fix with, like, moves or potentially really good abilities. And again, speaking of moves, like, for example, like, I was talking to Justin Tang about this a while ago now, probably like earlier this year, and I was saying to him, like, hey, Garchomp is like a mon that sees like no play. In the current format of VGC, the ground types are like so hard to come by. You have Groudon, you have Landorus, and that's kind of it. What if you just give Garchomp Headlong Rush? And he told me, that would be crazy, don't do it. And look, he might be right. But right now, Earthquake Garchomp is just, it's not doing it. Maybe you give it a Headlong Rush and see how it goes. And like, again, that's just a quick example here. But that's definitely the kind of thing I want to see going forward in Pokemon. Just test it out. If like, for example, Fluttermane, if it's too broken with Moonblast, take Moonblast off it. Just take it away. Just say, hey, you only get Dazzling Gleam now. Same goes for Xerneas. If Xerneas with, Geomancy Moonblast is too good, you play around with it. You just give it Dazzling Gleam. Maybe Dazzling Gleam's too good. You take that away. You just give it Moonblast. So on and so forth. Another really important thing I want to talk about here as well when it comes to balance is removing inaccurate moves. Now, I cannot tell you how much I hate moves like Overheat having a 90% chance to miss, Rock Slide having a 90%, I said 90%, a 10% chance to miss, 90% accuracy, Origin Pulses, Precipice Blades, all of these moves here that like can miss, and are great. Precipice Blades, Origin Pulse, fantastic, right? They are weaker than Glacial Lance and Astral Barrage, and they can miss. And they're an arguably worse Pokemon too. It just, to me, it makes no sense. Now, again, I understand some of the trade-offs, right? Overheat is a 130 base power move, and it's only 90% accurate. But it also lowers your special attack by 2 stages. Now, I'm not saying you just make it 100% accurate and you call it a day there, but I would like to see them do things where, maybe they play around with it. They say, hey, what if we drop Overheat down to, say, 120 base power? 100% accuracy. Is it still too good? Or maybe do you start looking at things like recoil, right? You make it like Steel Beam, right? Maybe it's a 50% recoil move. Like, hey, yeah, you can click this button that's a nuke, but you're going to lose half your health for it. So, yeah, that's just something like really, really small. Inaccurate moves like do my head in. And you can kind of like lead that into my next thing here I want to talk about, which is like statuses. So essentially, you look at like Sleep Powder, right? Sleep Powder is a 75% accurate move. You look at Spore, which is a 100% accurate move. Why not make them both 100% accurate? Well, the reason for that is Spore is on very, very few Pokemon, right? You have basically Amoonguss, you have Breloom, and then that's all I really know that is like half decent. Of course, a Pokemon like Smeagol does get it, but really, they are the 2 major players that use Spore. Of course, you got things like Brute Bonnet as well, and I'm sure there's something else I'm forgetting that like is half decent with it. But really, Spore is, considered a lot better than Sleep Powder just because it's not on many Pokemon, right? But again, Sleep Powder is a fantastic move, and it's 75% accuracy, which is really sad. I'm sure we've all been there. We're playing Venusaur and Sun. We click Sleep Powder, we miss, we lose the game. It is what it is. But my suggestion here, right, especially when it comes to statuses and I guess just, balancing the game in general, I think status moves need to become dynamic. And what I mean by that is, Spore, for example, just theoretically here, let's just say Spore is always a guaranteed 2 turns of sleep. Therefore, you wake up on that 3rd turn always. And I think the way you can balance that is you say, hey, Sleep Powder is only ever 1 turn of sleep. So, for example, I can lead my Venusaur, I can click Sleep Powder, it's going to hit 100% of the time. but my opponent is going to wake up next turn. There's nothing I can do about it. There's no 1 in 3 chance to wake up here. Hey, maybe he gets max rolls, maybe he doesn't. It's just, hey, sleep powder is always 1 turn. Spore is always 2 turns. And again, you can play around with it. Maybe sleep powder needs to go to 2, spore needs to go to 3, something like that. I think that would be a little too broken, but I do think that would be a great way of balancing it. Again, you can start looking at, moves like Scald, for example. Scald was considered broken because it had a 30% chance to burn. Well, what if Scald only burnt you for 2 turns potentially, where maybe Will-O-Wisp, you could say, hey, Will-O-Wisp burns you for 4 to 5 turns. So just simple stuff like that, where I think making these status moves dynamic, again, it would add a lot of, just like player knowledge to the game. Okay, well, this burn's going to last 5 turns. This burn's going to last 2 turns. And again, there's ways you can do it, right? You can put a little indicator there, maybe inside the little burn symbol, you put like a 2 in it, and then the next turn it goes to a 1, and then it wears off, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I really think just making the status moves dynamic is one of the best ways to go about it, right? Because I'm sure we've all been there. You get paralyzed on a bulky Pokemon that's hard to remove. It sits there for 15 turns, and half of those it doesn't move. It's really annoying. And I guess while we're at it as well, talking about, T-Wave, let's just remove full para. I think T-Wave should be used for speed control, and that's it. Make it 1/4 speed, and we're good to go. I guess while we're at it too, Freeze, nerf Freeze, just swap to Frostbite, and yeah, that's it. But I really think status moves need to be fixed. Speaking of fixing stuff as well, I do think the type chart could really use with a bit of a revamp, right? When you look at it, you see types like the Fairy type, being incredibly good. The Steel type is incredibly good. The Water type is incredibly good, right? These types are fantastic. Then you look at the Ice types, you look at the Bug types, and they're maybe not so good, right? Their type chart really doesn't help them out a lot, right? Of course, there are certain things where, maybe you get a really good Bug type, right? In the earlier gens, you had things like Sizzle being really good. Sizzle was also a Steel type, though, of course. You look at the metagame recently as well, like Zacian being a Fairy Steel type, obviously one of the best ones in the game. You also see Pokemon like Calyrex Ice Rider, which is an Ice type, which is, it's a pretty bad typing, if I'm being honest, but Glacial Lance is pretty damn broken, and it's probably the best statted Pokemon of all time. So yeah, I really think we need to have a fix to the type chart. I don't really have any suggestions on how to do this. I do think trying to keep it as even as possible would be nice, and what I mean by that is if you have 3 resistances, you also have 3, things that hit you for super effective damage. I think, if you're going to say have a lot of resistances like the Steel type, maybe you just shouldn't hit anything for super effective, or you just keep the Fairy types and call it a day. Again, I think the Ice types, the Rock types, they have way too many weaknesses, right? Their moves are also pretty inaccurate, which doesn't help the typings, but yeah, I do think just some revamp of the type charts, balancing it out, maybe looking to make things like the Ice type and the Bug type a bit better, while also potentially nerfing the things like the Fairies, the Steels, the Waters. And before we move on from balance changes, the last thing I want to talk about here is the crit chance. I would like us to play in a world where there was no such thing as just a random crit chance. I think crit should still be in the game. I think, if you're going to do it, you have a move like Surging Strike is a guaranteed crit. Maybe you have things like Night Slash and you just say, hey, these are, a 25, or what is it? I think it's like a 12% chance to crit. You can leave that in the game. They're a high crit rate move. I think having some RNG is fine, but I really don't like just the random ability to potentially crit. Again, I think I don't want to say it takes away from the skill, but I mean, we've all been there. I played a tournament once where my opponent set up light screens and he started stockpiling. And yes, he let me click 7 Moonblast with a Choice Specs Flutter Mane, but eventually I just one-shot his mon because I crit. And it was one of those things, I didn't play around it well. If anything, I actually think I played that game pretty poorly, but my opponent kind of just sat there recovering and buffing its Spadef, and then I eventually crit it and I won the game. So yeah, I also would like to see crits removed. Speaking of tournament play, I do think Pokemon Champions needs a better tournament system, right? And what I mean by that is, if I'm going to play in a regional, right? For example, my next regional is probably the Perth Regional Championships, if I had to guess. I don't want it to go through Arcanine Labs. I think everything should run through Pokemon Champions. I think Game Freak should set up the the tournament in Pokemon Champions. I think I should have to accept it using my account, which again should be linked to my Nintendo account. Potentially, you just say, hey, you can't, register without having a Nintendo account. And then you can go in there and for example, because this leads into my next thing, which is a Spectator Mode, which again, I think a Spectator Mode is absolutely needed. If we're going to go into an eSport, this has to have a Spectator Mode. But let's just say, for example, I'm sitting here, I'm watching the Charlotte Regional Championships, and the GOAT Wolf Glick is playing. I want to be able to watch his whole run. I don't want to just be, watching whoever's on stream, I want to say, hey, Wolf is playing. He's playing a really cool team. I want to watch his entire run. And the way you do that is, you go round one, maybe, you can scroll through, search for a name, whatever. Hell, maybe I have to be friends with him, which, maybe that would be a bit more difficult. But if they did add that, I'll reach out. I'll try and get a friend code. But, like, hey, maybe you can watch your friend's tournament runs. Maybe I reach out to a guy like JoeUX9 and say, hey, add me. I want to stream your run. Perfect, right? Stuff like that. But yeah, I think just one, a proper tournament system where everything runs in champions, remove RK9 labs and all that external stuff. And then two, spectator mode, just add it in. I think it is crazy to me that we're in 2025 and we can't, watch other people play games. Like if Temtem could do it 5 years ago, Pokemon can definitely do it now. And then I guess as an extension to wrap up this part of the video, VS recorder, bring it back. Let me record my battles and rewatch them. Even just have it so it saves my last, say, 20 replays, so I can go back and watch my last 20 games I played. Transitioning on from competitive play, I want to talk about the private battles in the game. So I think it is really, really important that in Pokemon Champions, you can kind of do whatever you want off the ranked ladder. Now, of course, if there's going to be a ranked ladder, I expect, particular formats and whatnot, and that's something we'll talk about later. But right now, I want to talk about private battles, right? Now, again, I do think this first topic, which is 6v6 singles, potentially I would like to see a ranked ladder for that as well. But if they don't give us a ranked ladder, I want people to be able to play that with their friends, right? Say if me and one of my friends want to play, a 6v6 singles battle, we can do it no timer or an hour timer, however you want it, but have some customization. Don't limit us to a 20-minute timer. Of course, I think that is that goes without saying, right? The Pokemon community has been, crying for this for a year. Oh, sorry, a year, like a very long time now, many years. And I really think they need to add that into the game. And then further on as well, I think private battles is going to be really cool for people who, enjoy draft leagues, right? My introduction to competitive Pokemon was through a draft league with friends. I absolutely loved it. I think it was fantastic. The one thing I didn't like about drafts, especially in Scarlet and Violet, is if you wanted to change your Terra every week, you had to do so much damn grinding. It was awful. I think I played 2 draft leagues at the start of Scarlet and Violet, and I literally didn't play again because I was like, there is way too much grinding offline for this. And I'm someone who needs those resources for VGC, you know what I mean? So yeah, of course, I think, just the endless possibilities of a draft league and champions is going to be there. Again, one, just having the teams potentially ready to go is like fantastic. But again, two, just like being able to change up the format, so the rule set, playing whatever you like, I think is really, really cool. I would also love to see them bring back old formats and potentially, old battle types, things like rotation battles, air battles, triple battles, etc. Yeah. Like one, right now, the VGC 2018 ladder is popping off on Showdown. A lot of people are playing it. A lot of people are having really fun. I think having a fun ladder like that, or just the ability to say, hey, we're going to play VGC 2018, I think would be really cool. Hell, I actually was talking to someone the other day who was saying, like, man, I miss Reg H. I just wish we had Reg H. I hate these new regulations. Well, sick. You like Reg H? Let's go do some, Reg H battles here on a private battle. Easy, you click Regulation H. That's the rule set you're playing. I think that would be awesome. And yeah, I kind of already mentioned it, but I think just bringing back old battle types, again, for people who want to do it, like, I'm not going to play an air battle, but I'm sure there's someone out there who would love to. So, speaking of formats as well, I want to discuss new formats, because I do think this is one of the biggest things about Pokemon Champions. I kind of mentioned at the start, but we are definitely due for a new format. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, in my opinion, over the last, really year and a bit, has been a bit boring. Outside of Regulation H, I did not enjoy the single restricted meta. I'm really not enjoying the double restricted meta. And again, that all kind of goes back to balance. It was something I didn't really touch on, but like the restricted legendaries are so imbalanced right now. And like, I probably should have touched on that more earlier, but yeah, like you've got like 9 good restricteds and there's like 30 available. It's like really bad balance, but it is what it is. Let's talk about the decks, because again, one, I'm super excited to potentially go back to a regional decks format. And that kind of leads into my first, point here when it comes to the formats, right? Or the launch of this game, I was going to say. So when you look at things like Pokemon Go and Pokemon TCG Pocket, they mostly launched with Generation 1 Pokemon. So I believe Pokemon Go was just Generation 1. And I think Pokemon TCG Pocket was not only Gen 1, but it was like focused on Gen 1, where it was like probably like 80-90% of the cards were Generation 1. And that's kind of where it leads me into here with the, the roster on launch. Of course, we did see things like Aegislash, Hisuian Samurott, and, Dondozo were all in the game, or at least presumably should be there day one. But I would love nothing more than our first format to be what I have called the Indigo Cup. And what I am kind of, I guess, hinting at here is, or kind of saying is, I would love if they launched this game and the only Pokemon available are Generation 1 and 2 Pokemon. I think that would be one of the coolest formats we could ever play, right? Especially if you add things like Mega Because like one really cool thing with Gen 1 too is like you have all of the weathers, right? And again, it's like it's obviously a really low power format. Ones like D Knight and T-Tar could like run rampant. Megazard Y obviously is another one that comes right to my head. But like when I think of like a Gen 1 and Gen 2 decks, like you've got like, okay, Mega Charizard plus Venusaur Sun. That sounds really cool. Of course, T-Tar's in the game. I can't think of any rock abusers off the top of my head, but like T-Tar obviously is like just a really good Pokemon, like insanely statted in those early generations. And of course, if like Megazard Y was a thing, T-Tar's going to be a thing. It's good. And then, what else do you have? Polytoad's there. So you've got Rain. You can run like, Kingdra. You can run Golduck. Like there's some really cool stuff there. Technically speaking, you could add a Alolan Ninetales and just say, hey, it's kind of lumped in with Generation 1. Again, I don't know what snow. Oh, dude, I was going to say, I don't know what snow abusers we have. Man, we got Articuno, Snowcloak Articuno out here doing some crazy stuff. But yeah, I think like something like that to launch thing would be really cool. But at the end of the day, I just think having the ability to change up the formats is it's one of the biggest selling points for this game. Because like really like again, we got ZA coming out, right? And again, this is also where I kind of lean to when I'm saying things like, hey, let's like drop, the game before Worlds. Let's go play some crazy format for a couple months. Then when ZA drops, right, give us like 2 months or whatever, and then you put a ZA format into the game. And then all of a sudden you are playing with potentially, say, these mega evolutions, right? We're going to have some new megas. Like I know there was a bunch of leaks earlier in the year, but there's supposedly new megas coming into the game. There's going to be new Pokemon in the game. Like, of course, Aegislash was again revealed in the game, right? It's a Gen 6 Pokemon. We didn't have Aegislash in Generation 9. There's a lot of other cool Pokemon as well that like I would love to use that just unavailable in the game right now. So I think having something like that would be just awesome. New formats are sick, and like I just feel like there's so much possibilities they could do with this game, man. And now the final thing I kind of wanted to briefly touch on here before we wrap up this video is the PvE modes in the game. Now, I do think this game needs some form of story. If it is going to be free to play, I don't think we're going to be getting a big story, maybe like an hour or two introduction. But I would definitely love to see something like a Battle Frontier type mode added to this game as a way to earn in-game currencies. Because I didn't really talk about it earlier, but how you're going to build your team in this game is going to be very, very important. And because of that, I do think having in-game currency is probably the way to go. Whether, you use that currency to buy things like vitamins, right? Potentially bottle caps, nature mints, all that kind of stuff, I do think is going to be very important. Now, again, I do hope there is a way to earn that through just playing online battles, of course, but I do think having something like a Battle Frontier, maybe it's multiplayer, you can play through it with friends. Like, I know I was chatting to the homie Ice about this like months ago, but I was saying like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we just like ran up like the multi-battle, the what is it, the battle tower like doubles or something? He builds a team, I build a team, and like, you build it to specifically work with each other. And then you earn some in-game currency, right? It could be fun, you could earn a bit of cash. It would be really, really nice. But yeah, like I think there has to be some form of PvE, and again, just some way to earn in-game currency to, not necessarily breed, but just help you get your teams in game. Because again, I didn't really touch on it in this video, and maybe I should have earlier, but I do think it's going to be really important how accessible this is. Like, how long does it take me to build a team? I'm assuming this isn't going to be Pokemon Showdown, right? I don't think I'm going to have a slider where I can just move it to, 252 and we're all good. But it would be really cool if there was an option where it's like, oh, hey, you've got 100, is it like Carbos? I think Carbos is speed. So say like I've got like 100 Carbos in my bag and I've got like 100 speed feathers or something. And I drag it to like, say 116. Like, it would be really nice if it just optimized that for me. Oh, it's like, okay, I can drag it over there. Well, okay, this is going to cost you, 11 Carbos, 6 speed feathers, bang, you're good to go. So that would be like really, really sick. And in my opinion, that probably is the optimal way to do it. But of course, like who knows how they're going to do this, man. Like, of course, you have the option to bring Pokemon in from older games, which means I could EV train something in Scarlet and Violet and bring it across. Something I didn't actually mention here as well either, and God, I'm like really annoyed at myself for it. Because it actually was in my original script. I'll give you guys like a bit of backstory here. I've been trying to record this video for like 2 weeks now, and so I basically did one recording. I wasn't happy with it. I re-recorded the video. I wasn't happy with it. So I redid the entire script, and now we're here. And I have to be happy with it because it has to go out tomorrow night. But that's besides the point, yeah. But one thing I actually mentioned as well was the potential of like redoing how EVs work, right? Because if you look at how potentially how things are going to go in the near future, right? Of course, when you look at ZA, how it's going, and you potentially look at the fact that, hey, Generation 10 might actually move us away from the Pokemon we've played for the last, 30 odd years. And because of that, I do think if they were ever going to redo how EVs work, that this would be the time. And what I mean by that is like you say, hey, in Pokemon Champions, 1 HP EV is just 1 HP. 2 HP EVs is just 2 EVs, so on and so forth, right? Or it's like you get the stat buff, I should say. Like 1 HP EV equals 1 HP point, right? So something like that I think would be really interesting just to simplify the game. I also think reworking how EVs work would be really interesting. And what I mean by that is, you could keep the cap that we have right now where you say, hey, 255 is still like the limit. But I think it would be really interesting to play around with potentially giving us more EVs than we currently have. Even, potentially removing some of the EVs we have right now as well could be interesting. Say you cap us at 500, you could even potentially move it to 1,000. It would entirely depend on how they change the stats to work. As I said, I do think like a 1-for-1 would be really interesting. And again, I don't know what the math on that would be. I guess it's like divided by 4, right? So if we're at 512, you're looking at like 100 and, or that'd be like 120, is it 128? I think something like that. I don't know, somewhere in that like 120 range. You could reduce that and say, hey, you have 120 EVs, you have 100 EVs. Maybe you increase it, say you have 150. I think that would be really interesting, and it could potentially change the way we play the game because one, I think more EVs is probably better for balance. But it would also mean Pokemon like, for example, my goat Chiyu, you could potentially say, hey, this is a Pokemon that wants a lot of speed, but it also needs to hit hard. But then because of that, it like has no bulk, right? And you can maybe change it up and say, hey, I'm just gonna dump extra points into my HP because I've got it. So something like that could be like really, really cool. Um, but yeah, look, I think I've been here rambling on and off. I'm pretty sure I touched on everything I wanted to do today. And I kind of mentioned it before, but the reason I'm doing this is because I want to get this out like 2 weeks before the next presents, which is like literally like 15 days from now for me, I think. And I think, and again, I said at the start of the video, I am certain. Well, I didn't say this at the beginning of the video, but I'm certain we're about to get news for this game. There will be, news on this new direct, which I think is like the 23rd of July. But I think we're gonna get a release date. And I'm praying for the week after Worlds. There is still a chance they shadow drop it at Worlds. I didn't mention that earlier, but that's kind of the thing I've been holding on to for a little bit. But I really, really do hope that they do announce the release date for it in this July direct, simply because I want to take a week off work for this game. I want to sit down. I want to grind it out. I want to pump out some content because, man, I know I've been saying it to people I've spoken to behind the scenes for a while now, but I've been wanting to make content for the last like 4 months. I am just not happy to play the current format of VGC, and it's been really sad. But because of that, I'm super excited for Champions. I cannot wait to see where this game goes. And yeah, I'm just excited to play. If you guys made it to the end of the video, obviously, tell me down below what you were excited for with this game. Tell me what you want to see. Tell me what you think I'm right on. Tell me what you think I'm wrong on. At the end of the day, this is just a video to basically spark discussion. Because as I said, we are only 2 weeks away from launch. Sorry, from the next presents, and I do think we will be getting a lot of information regarding this game. But yeah, anyway, guys, that's gonna be it for this one. I'll catch you to the next one. Peace.